Hey, welcome. I'm excited for our very first marriage ministry roundtable and glad to be sharing it with my friends Stephen and Lauren, who will introduce themselves here in a moment. What we try to do is take a common marriage topic and hopefully deliver some insight, some wisdom on how to make it better. Today, we're talking about reconnecting. What does it look like? What does it feel like when we drift apart? How do we come back together? But before we get into the topic, let me let Stephen and Lauren introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about how long they've been married and a little bit about their family. So guys, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'll go first. So I'm Stephen. I get to serve as a men's minister here at Rock Point. Chelsea and I have been married for, I guess it's about 11 and a half years, together for about 13 years. We have 2 kids, Bo and Bella, 5 and 3, about to be 6 and 4. And I think something about that I really appreciate, but has also at times been a tension point for our marriage, is that we're both in ministry, both in leadership positions within our respective ministries. And so I think for us, we are able to encourage and we understand the grind of ministry and the desire to help others. But within that, there's also those times where it kicks us out to outside of family time, and one of us has to carry the load with the kids more, which is kind of a bit of a rub at times, you know, if one of us is on a trip or something like that. So, but with that being said, we really appreciate that Lord has invited us into His work, and we get to do that together, which I think is unique for our
Yeah, that is unique. Tricky balance. It's not just a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lauren.
I'm Lauren Etter. Kyle, my husband, we have been married now almost 22 years, and we have been together 24 years. And so we have a new season because we have one in school, in college, one senior, and one freshman. So we're entering into a new season for us where kiddos are not going to be home anymore, and we have like our Act 2 coming up. And so we're really excited to share what God has done in our marriage, because I can say that having Him at the center of our marriage as we've grown together has deepened our marriage in a way that would not be possible, and in a way that we didn't imagine when we first got married. So that's one major transition that happened for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm the grandfather of the group. Stephanie and I have been together for 30 years. We've got 2 young adult daughters, 27 and 24. So glad that you guys are here. Let's talk about what it means to reconnect, and just be honest about the fact that in the course of our marriages, no matter how long they are, we can drift apart. And that was a terrifying thought for me when I first got married. I was hoping that that would never happen. I would always feel as intensely about my wife as I did at the wedding. But the truth is that the love we start with isn't enough to sustain us for the long haul. So it's a natural thing to feel this drift, but what do you think are some of the reasons why we drift apart? Thoughts?
Yeah, I think I can speak for, like, Chelsea and I, we're in that season of trying to make sure our kids don't hurt one another when they're around the house. And so it is always an intense amount of focus that you have to put on a younger set of kids, or a younger child, that you're trying to make sure that they are safe and that they are cared for. And I realize that there are different seasons for parenthood, but we're just in one of those intensely focused times. As you put it earlier, you had mentioned that it's like prison ministry, basically. So that's kind of the phase that we're in. And so in some ways, it decreases the level of attention and priority that we show toward one another in our marriage relationship. Because Chelsea and I have had these conversations where it's like, gosh, I don't know that we connected today other than connecting over how to discipline our kids, or connecting over trying to pack up their lunchbox, or connecting over putting them down at night. And so I think that it tends to be a really difficult scenario to put your focus on the other person, which is what I believe that God has called us to do. I would say that's been a tough thing for us.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Got career and kids, and busy schedules, push out and make it very difficult and challenging to connect with each other. Good thoughts. Lauren?
I would say for us, we have entered a season now with our kids being in college and almost college, and now a third one almost driving, is that we are in the phase of trying to keep our children out of an actual prison ministry. We prefer that route. But what we have been blessed with now, and we're going to have more of it, is that we have, when our kids were little, the lack of time, we have now an abundance of time with each other. And so I think it's kind of rediscovering what we can do with each other. There's more time for each other and for individually, which we haven't had in many years. And so it's been a transition into, one, do I still like you that much? And two, being excited for that. My husband tends to be very excited. I tend to be the morning. But we do need to be excited because it's a gift that we get to be in this place. But it is different because we're not young bucks anymore like we were when we first got married and can do all the things we used to be able to do. So it's kind of figuring out who we are now and how to pour into each other and also give each other confidence to do what God has for us now that we have more time.
Yeah, what to do with time. And let me just bring up the dirty word of boredom, because we don't like to say that about our marriages, but I mean, is it fair to say that there are seasons where we just look over at the other and we go, man, I'm just kind of bored in kind of where we are? Is that, don't leave me hanging here, don't make me...
Yes, absolutely.
We're always enthused with one another. No, we've had those moments where we'll have a rare date night in our case as far as time together. And we finally get to the table and dinner and we sit there and we say, we just stare at one another. It's just like, oh, what do we talk about? I mean, we've been together for 11 and a half, or been married for 11 and a half years. And so it's just like, all right, we almost know.
Yeah,
we've already
know what I want to say.
Literally everything. So,
Yeah. And one thing I'd add to the list that contributes to drift as I counsel with couples is those hurts, those wounds, those resentments that can accumulate over time certainly can cause drift. When we get into our marriages even early on and we sense, oh, this person is very different than me, or my needs aren't getting met. And maybe we bring them up, maybe we don't, but if they go unmet or unresolved over time, that will certainly create some of that feeling of drift, of either I've lost hope that this is going to be something that's going to be able to fix, that we're going to be able to fix, or just this simmering, brooding anger that this continues to be a problem for us. So I think that's a drift issue. Is there anything else that comes to mind that we'd want to mention that contributes to drift?
I think one of the things that continues is an unrealistic expectation that what you all enjoy and what you know about each other when you first get married, that has to stay the same. I think you have to give permission for God to do what God does. And continue to allow Him to change you and mold you and give you different experiences so you have something to share. And I think often we get into marriage and think it's going to be just this way forever. You know, I like this, you like this, and we're not going to change, and that isn't realistic. So it can be threatening if one person's changing, the other one isn't. Because we like routine and we don't like change. So usually we have one that fights it and one that holds on to it. And so we didn't know it at the time, but looking back, that's one of the things Kyle and I were at, is that, you know, one wanted everything to stay the same, and one was like, let's do something different. And it's just communicating and embracing that. It keeps it fresh and something new to talk about and discuss. And it's okay to have different experiences. I think you can make your spouse your everything and put them on a pedestal, and that's your identity. And that's a dangerous spot to get in, because your identity isn't a child of God. And you need to have different interests and different things to do. So you have something to discuss. And so if you're together nonstop, and you share every same experience, there's nothing to discuss. So I think those deposits into your marriage that you make into yourself globally make a big difference.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, because we do grow after the wedding. And the honest truth is we do grow at different rates, at different speeds, at different and sometimes the drift that we feel is because something's happening in somebody's life over here. Maybe their career's exploding, or maybe somebody's going to therapy and they're dealing with old hurts, and there's growth and excitement, and we're not in the same speed, we're not in the same place, and so that creates distance as well. I think that's a great insight. I remember a dead conversation I was having with Stephanie about 6 years into our marriage, just boring conversation, and I had brought along some general questions to try to spark conversation. But one of the, I'll never forget it. I asked her, I said, the question was, what are your hopes and dreams for the next 5 years? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And everything that came out of her mouth next was a shock to me. I had no idea that that's what she was thinking or feeling or wanting. And she had grown and moved, and I hadn't kept up. So, yeah, good thoughts. Drift is natural. Drift is going to happen. Lots of reasons that contribute to it. When we get ready to try to reconnect with our spouses, would you say that there are some important attitudes or frames of mind or perspectives that we need to embrace in order to start making that journey back to one another? What are some things that you would offer and say, I think these are some important things that you want to pack for this journey back to each other? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that for us, it boils down to, do I take this person for granted or not? I think it is a posture of being thankful and grateful that they're in your life, because oftentimes we can forget what life was like outside of them. And I think for Chelsea and I, it's just kind of a jogging of our memory in some ways, but I think it's a posture of coming to the Lord and just saying thank you so much, because I couldn't, for me personally, there's no way I could order our lives the way that Chelsea does. She's the administrator, organizer side of things, and I'm like, I don't know, I guess things just clean themselves around here. No, she employs me quite well and mobilizes me to clean the dishes every now and then. But I think that for me it's just an opening of the eyes, because oftentimes we can forget how important it is that they're there, right there with us in the thick of things, and to cherish that, because oftentimes we don't.
Yeah, gratitude. That's a great insight. And sometimes we can feel like, oh my goodness, this person's never leaving my life. But it's a good exercise to say, let me remember what it was like when they weren't here, and what a blessing that they are. That's great. Lauren, you got a thought?
I think it's very easy when you get to routine to take each other for granted. And I think that's a danger point. And so I think it's very easy, at least I'm a female, to look at all the things that your husband does that annoy you, irritate you, that he doesn't do, as opposed to flipping it and looking at all the things he does well, and the things that you love about him, and things you appreciate about him.
So that's what happens. Okay.
Sometimes.
Thank you for giving us that.
Yes,
Yeah,
I can say
translating.
in the middle of the night, I'm very irritated when I'm being woken up by the lulls of Kyle snoring. But I do appreciate that he vacuums much better than I do. So, and there's times that it's very easy to fall into that. So I think too, you can look at the world around us and you can see how many marriages are being attacked and imploding. And so I think it's to look at that. I think it's good to look at your husband and be grateful that you're still in it together, and that there's value there, and that there is a love there, and that you need to continue to make deposits into that relationship and not take it for granted. It's something to be treasured. That covenant relationship is to be treasured. And so I feel like if you treasure your spouse, usually it's received in the same way. And so the more I try to love Kyle well, the more I receive in return, and vice versa. And to see that your spouse is not your enemy. That person's on your side. I think sometimes they become the one that all the negative lands on, and that's not always fair. So have grace, but also remember that they're not the enemy. I've had that said to me, and it was like a slap
we're
in the
teammates.
face.
Yeah, we're together.
It stung.
Because you're both in the foxhole of life together, and it requires a level of responsibility for both people to shoulder that load and to say, okay, well, what is my part in this, and how can I contribute to rekindling or reawakening of this partnership and this beautiful relationship that God has allowed me to be a part of.
Yeah. It reminds me of Ecclesiastes, two are better than one, and then that check down list of what exactly that means, that we help one another up, that we fight our enemies back to back. We don't face one another and fight each other. We're paying attention to those enemies that are trying to undo the good thing God's trying to do in our marriages. And so, looking back is good, but I would suggest that also kind of looking forward with curiosity is key to get in this headspace. I like the way Paul mentions it in 1 Corinthians 13, that when he says, I know in part and I see in part, I think is one of the healthiest mindsets when we are trying to work on anything in our marriage, to look to the other and say, I know in part and I see in part. I don't know everything about this person. There's still more to discover. There's more to enjoy. I want to know what we can be in the future, because we don't know exactly all the parts of who this person is. And so, gratitude looking back, curiosity, just opening up expectation of what can be. Is there anything else that you would say that's would be an important mindset or attitude that you would want to encourage couples who are reconnecting to embrace?
I think, to me, when it all comes down to brass tacks, is to really ask yourself this question. I think it falls in line with responsibility. It's just like, do I love this person, and not just love in the sense of, because clearly for many of us, if you've been in a relationship and marriage for such a long time, that those feelings will inevitably go away. But it's for husbands, I think in particular, if I can speak to husbands, is God calls us as husbands to be sacrificial initiators, and I draw that from Ephesians 5, where Christ loves the church and gave himself up for her. These wayward people that were disobedient to him, and not saying, please don't hear me say wives and disobedience, but the idea there is God is pursuing his people that were essentially in a lot of ways his enemies, and it just gives us as an example of how we are to conduct ourselves in our marriage relationships. Is like, that's what love looks like. Is even in the face of nasty words, or even in the face of unresolved conflict or boredom or whatever, it is a pursuit, a limitless pursuit of the other person's heart. And I think for husbands in particular, as people that are by nature designed to be hunter-gatherers, if you will. I call that going to the grocery store. That's what I do. For our relationship, as I told Chelsea, is like it was a toss-up one day. It was like, hey, who should go to the store, because it was inconvenient for both of us. And said, hey, I'm the hunter-gatherer. I'll go to the store. And so with that, sometimes we can sit down as husbands and just say, okay, I caught my prey and I'm done, and there's no challenge anymore. And I've heard it said that the challenge and the hunt really starts when you say I do at the altar. It is that continual pursuit of understanding and trying to understand better who God has put you with, or he has allowed you to be put with, I should say. So,
yeah. Well, extending that caveman metaphor of hunter-gatherer.
You realize that's a T-shirt you're getting soon. We're gonna have that across the front.
How do we restart the fire in our relationship? How do we rekindle these love feelings and these good memories? I mean, what has worked for you guys? Something that we can leave our couples with that could be an action step. Is there something that has worked for you guys in the past? All right,
I have
Lauren.
I have a good one. I think too, and it sounds hokey, but it actually, because I pushed back when we first did, but it's actually a really good practice, is to ask your spouse, right now, how can I love you well? Because what worked last year, even last week or yesterday, may have changed depending on what's going on. And so like when we were early married and we had little ones, I mean, anything he could do to help as far as getting me out of the house, I was ready to do. Now, for me, it's acts of service. It's, you know, doing the dishes, it's coming home and vacuuming. And for Kyle, it was, it went from like little thoughtful gifts to words of affirmation to hanging his laundry in a color-coded way.
Wow.
He loves where I shove mine in the drawers. I mean, he even folds underwear. I'm like, really?
Wow.
So I mean,
Wow.
he goes above and beyond.
We're getting an insight
yes,
here
yes.
into
Yes.
Kyle.
And I actually, he would say this just 2 nights ago. I said, thank you for folding everything so nicely, because so there's some drawers I just throw it in there, but I fold and roll all his things because it's important to him.
Ooh,
and
that's
I will
very
tease him,
loving.
but it's important. So I
Loving.
think
Good.
finding those
That is.
things that really matter to your spouse and that changes.
Yeah.
Kyle has new hobbies. He's had some of the same hobbies like golf and basketball and watching sports, but he's recently just discovered he wants to play the drums. So he has a drum set in the garage and he works out and plays the drums, and I leave him alone for that 2 hours. And so, and then he lets me have time. So I think it's important to ask those questions as to, you know, what's working for you right now, what's not, how can I love you well right now? And I think it may be awkward, but being transparent with each other, that will really help your marriage if you say, this is what I need right now from you.
Yeah, that's an act of vulnerability. What a great question. You know, how can I best love you now? I heard Laura Heck, a therapist, say that our marriages change about every 7 years. And so as I look at my own 30-year marriage, it's not a calendarized thing, but that's a good way to notice the shifts. But in each one of those shifts, to your point, it was also a time to renegotiate our roles and who we were and how we did things and how we loved one another. And so, you know, one good suggestion that I would offer couples would be, first of all, remember your vows that you made at your wedding.
Yes.
Most of us don't remember what we said in that moment. We just said whatever was told to us. But go back and revisit those vows, and then do this. Add a new vow to your spouse to love them in a way that they need to be loved. And so, you know, it may be, you know, like for me right now, it's, you know, I promise to get more fit so that my health doesn't become problematic in our marriage. But I love the idea of being able to renegotiate our roles, whether it's grocery shopping or whatever, or more responsibility in finances, and making a new vow to one another in order to reconnect. So
I love that.
You got
I
a
love that.
suggestion?
Yeah, as you're talking about remember, I am reminded of something that really pops up in Scripture so often. We see this all throughout the Old Testament in particular, but also New Testament. God is calling His people to remember these significant deposits that He has made in His pursuit of winning His people over to Him, I should say. And we see that in the Passover meal. He is calling His people to remember that He had really redeemed them out of slavery in Egypt, and eating that bread was significant to them. And so I think for us, if we feel stuck in our marriages, we need to go back and remember how it all began to begin with. I think for Chelsea and I, we'll use these little conversation cards. When the conversation is stale, it sounds hokey, but you can find some on Amazon, or you can just Google conversation cards for couples and they'll pop up. And one of the questions I remember in particular was, what were you wearing when we first met, or we had the other person say. And I remember Chelsea, I think it was the first time that I had spotted my prey out in the wild. She was wearing a blue dress, a light blue dress with like these little cute red birds on it. And I remember that was just like, gosh, it just looked refreshing to me. And it was just like, gosh, and even remembering that can help bring some refreshing thoughts back to you. And another practical thing is something on social media that pops up every now and then for us is this post or this picture was taken 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And we look to see how much we have changed. Our bodies have changed. We have multiplied ourselves with kids, and we actually went back to an event that we had attended 13 years prior, and that we had taken a picture at, and we took a picture with our kids in that same place.
Oh,
and so I think
cool.
it was kind of fun. But,
yeah, not losing the past. And no matter what happens, those old memories still have warmth and are still a treasure to go get them. So, well, let me just say this in conclusion, guys. What does success look like when we try to reconnect? The goal here is not to fall madly in love, overnight. It's just a steady process of making our way back to each other and renewing joy, cultivating empathy, staying curious and interested in one another, and being partners. And even when you bring up this subject of reconnecting, even if it erupts in an argument, don't be discouraged, because conflict isn't always the sign of failure. It could be a sign of new growth. As you uncover some things that have been bothering you and you say them out loud and you work to resolve them, all that's good stuff. So be encouraged if you just have the desire to reconnect. So grateful for Stephen and Lauren giving us their good thoughts.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and good examples and good friendship, and let us know how we can